Good morning, and welcome to the next stop on our virtual field day. I'm Virgil Schmidt, Extension Field Agronomist, and I am currently at the Southeast Research and Demonstration Farm near Crawfordsville. The Southeast Farm is one of 6 locations where our next presenter, Dr. Allison Robertson, conducts what she calls the Cardinal fungicide trials. Thank you for attending. We look forward to having you attend future field days. And now, without further ado, here is Dr. Allison Robertson.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Allison Robertson. I'm an extension plant pathologist here at Iowa State. Welcome to our virtual field day. I'm really happy that you could join us this morning. And today I'm going to be talking about what I call the Cardinal fungicide trials, which is kind of like my nickname for them. These trials are predominantly done on corn. Darren Mueller, as many of you know Darren, he does a very similar trial on soybeans across the state. But the Cardinal trials are done at 5 of the outlying research farms, and then 1 in central Iowa on the usually around the ag engineering and agronomy farm. So those 5 outlying farms would be the Armstrong Memorial Research Farm down in southwest Iowa, the Southeast Research Farm near Crawfordsville, the Northeast Research Farm near Nashua, the Northern Research Farm near Kanawha, and then where we are today at the Northwest Research Farm just near Sutherland. So we've driven up here this morning. It was a beautiful drive up, and this is the first time that I'm out here in the trial. We're probably getting close to brown silk, as you can see from the trial. So this trial would have been sprayed last week with the fungicides. Oh, I see some more northern corn leaf blight. That's cool. Okay, so I have this trial at these 6 locations around Iowa, and I've been doing this trial since 2007. And so I want to just give you a little bit of a history of the trial, why I'm doing it. Traditionally, hybrid corn was not sprayed with a fungicide, but then around about 2006, 2007, there was a lot of interest in spraying fungicides on corn. And so, of course, there were a lot of questions, right? Is it worth spraying a fungicide on corn, on hybrid corn? When do we need to spray a fungicide on hybrid corn? Most of the time, hybrid corn has very good resistance to diseases compared to, you know, if you're growing seed corn, you'll know that those inbred lines are pretty susceptible to disease. So that was the question, should we be spraying fungicides on hybrid corn? And so that's where we started with back in 2007, this was a very small trial. I maybe had 3 products, 1 from BASF, 1 from Bayer, and 1 from Syngenta, and we came in and we sprayed the corn at tasseling, and that was it. Well, as you can imagine, as more questions arose about spraying fungicides, the trial has evolved. So the way that I look at this trial now is that there are lots of questions that I get from you know, who are using the fungicides or who are recommending the fungicides. Every year around about this time, we're in, you know, early to mid-July, I have people asking me, should I spray my corn? When should I, what should I spray my corn with? What is the best product? So one of the goals of this trial is to compare products. So, you know, whereas we started with 3 or 4 products on corn, today there are a lot of different products that can be sprayed on corn. And then plus those products are evolving, right? We've gone from just a straight QOI or strobilurin or a DMI or a triazole alone. We've gone to combination of those products. Then we had the SDHIs introduced, so now we have products that contain all 3 active ingredients. We also have products that have evolved, so companies have changed the DMI that they're using in the fungicide, for example. And so the whole idea behind these trials is to try and collect data. Is one product better than another product? That's what we hope to compare in these trials. Another question that comes up when spraying a fungicide is, when is the best time to apply that fungicide, right? And so when we first started applying fungicides to corn, we came in and we applied that fungicide at tassel silking. You know, that was the best time. But then came this idea, well, maybe we should be spraying that corn early on when the corn's at V5 to V6, and then coming back again at when the corn's, you know, pollinating, and seeing how is that better? Is 2 applications better than 1? Is a V6 timing better than an R1 timing, etc. And so for 10 years we did trials where we compared a V5, V6 timing with an R1 timing with a V5, V6 plus R1 timing, and we collected data on that. You know, what is the best possible timing? As I'm sitting here talking, or standing here talking to you, I think that what I should have told you is, like, what data are we collecting, right? So, I mean, what is the best fungicide and what is the best timing, but for what? So I'm a pathologist, so I want to know what the best is for disease control. But I understand that at the end of the day, what pays your bills is yield. And so apart from collecting disease data, we also collect yield data. And many of you know that there have been physiological effects that have been associated with fungicides. And so, for example, so they help in, well, not increase yield, but actually protect the yield. And so oftentimes when you spray corn with a fungicide, you might see a greater yield compared to corn where the fungicide was not sprayed. So we collect data on that, right? What is the difference in yield that we collected among all these different treatments? So that's what we're going after. So really the main things, what we're doing is we're comparing products and we're comparing timings across these trials. Now, I have to admit that in the last couple of years, I no longer put in that V5, V6 early timing, because with 10 years of data have shown us that that timing is not better than an R1 application. And also, when we combine that early application with that R1 application, you don't get a synergistic effect. You rarely even get an additive effect of that. And so, you know, in times where the corn price is not that great and your return on an investment is, you know, really narrow, you're only going to want to spray your fields once, and so the best time to go in then is the best bang for your buck is going to be applying that fungicide at R1. When we first started doing these trials, we did it just using general funds that we had, but probably in the last 5 or 6 years, the companies have been very generous in supporting these trials. So every year, various chemical companies will come to me and say that they would like to include a couple of treatments in these trials, and so then they pay a nominal amount just to include that fungicide in the trial. And the other thing about the Cardinal fungicide trials is that we only work with labeled products. So that's one of the rules, because sometimes this trial can get really big. We can have 20 different treatments in here. And so when a trial starts to get too big and you get too many treatments, it's very hard to detect differences between those treatments. So to try and keep that variability down, we keep the number of treatments down. We increase the number of replications that we have. So we used to do 4 replications in every trial. Now we do 6 replications. So basically what that means is that treatment, there are 6 plots for that treatment within the trial, as opposed to 4 plots. That helps reduce our variability. The other thing about these trials is that they're at each of the outlying research farms, and the reason for that is so that we can collect data that is applicable to your area. You know, data from the Southeast Research Farm is probably not going to be very applicable to you guys up here in Northwest Iowa. And so we have these trials to represent what's going on. The other thing is that I let the farm managers choose the hybrids that they want to grow, and so it's a hybrid that's good for your area. In the early days, we did a comparison between corn on corn and corn and soybeans. Sometimes on those corn on corn plots, we would run into problems with nitrogen, and so I kind of encourage most of the farm managers to do corn on soybean, just so that we get a better looking crop. And I think you can see behind me that, I mean, this crop looks absolutely marvelous here at Sutherland. So even though this data is across the whole state, and I take that data for the whole state and make recommendations, there's also data for your specific area. And those data I write up every year in the farm research reports, and so they are available online, and we will provide you with a link to where you can find those reports. In some years there might not be a report for that year. For example, I remember in one year, I know for certain there's not a report from Armstrong, or there might not be a report from Kanawha. And so what happens, sometimes things happen, right? At Kanawha we had a severe lodging event, windstorm that came and lodged the corn and really mucked up the trial. And so, if I'm not happy with the data, if I'm not confident in how the trial looked, then I will not write up that trial. So if a trial's missing for 1 year, that's why it's missing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you on a trip into a plot and just show you what we do when we're collecting data for the disease. So how do I collect disease data? Depending on the farm, these plots will be usually anywhere from 30 to 100 foot long. Here at Sutherland, the Northwest Research Farm, the plots are about 50 feet long. So I take that into consideration because I want to get a representative of the plot when I'm collecting my data. So let's go for a walk in the corn. Stop. Okay, so I've taken about 10 paces into the plot, and this is where I'll then look at individual plants. So we usually collect data from the ear leaf. So I'll find the ear leaf, we'll look along the top here, there's no disease on this ear leaf. So then I go to the ear leaf -2, check that leaf, no disease going on there. I didn't choose a very good plant, did I? Oh, and then ear leaf -2. So we have some gray leaf spot going on here. You can see the gray leaf spot, those nice rectangular lesions. And so then I'll score this as, this is probably about, I'm going to give it a 3% for a gray leaf spot rating. So I'll write that number down and that'll be recorded. Sometimes we'll also look at the leaf above the ear leaf. So that's one way we can collect data. And this is a very good way to collect data for a disease like grey leaf spot. For other diseases, I'm not overly fond of this way. For example, if you're collecting data on northern corn leaf blight, you may have northern corn leaf blight developing in the bottom of the canopy, or you may have northern corn leaf blight developing in the top of the canopy. And so sometimes, depending on what disease is going on in the field and how much disease is out there, I might have to adjust how I'm assessing the disease. So that's why sometimes you might see the disease information presented a little bit differently from year to year. The goal of what I'm trying to get is I'm trying to collect data that's going to allow me to detect differences between the fungicides. And so that's what I'm always trying to keep in mind when I'm out here and I'm looking in the corn. For example, with northern corn leaf blight, sometimes that starts in the top of the canopy, right? So here's a good example of a beautiful cigar-shaped northern corn leaf blight lesion starting in the top of the canopy. If I had assessed the ear leaf and the leaves around the ear leaf, I would have missed collecting this data. And that data could be important to detect differences between the fungicides. And so I need to bear that in mind as I'm coming out here into the field.
I don't know if all the farmers call it beautiful lesions, but...
Okay, so it's obviously a little bit too early to harvest this, and me driving a combine would probably be a little scary, but we're going to collect yield data from this. And so what we do is we collect yield data usually from the middle 4 rows of each plot. A plot can be 6 to 8 rows wide depending on the farm, but we'll collect data from the yield data from the middle, all 4 middle rows of that plot, again trying to collect as much of the corn in that plot as possible to get as good a yield estimate as possible. This is nitrogen here. Okay, so in this trial you can see that we have some nitrogen deficiency going on in the lower canopy, and you can recognize that by the yellow V coming down the main line, the midrib of the leaf, and so that reminds me that, you know, this Cardinal trial has led to other experiments that we've done on these research farms, and I've worked with the farm managers on. So one of the most recent ones was, from your observations and from your questions to me, we wanted to look at how fungicides might affect standability. And so we actually did a trial at each of the outlying research farms where we had corn sprayed with a fungicide or not sprayed with a fungicide, and then we harvested that corn on 5 different dates. Immediately before harvest, the farm managers would go out and they would do the push test, push the corn and see if it lodged or not, and then they would count the number of plants that lodged. And that experiment actually resulted in a publication for us all, and we were able to show that yes, fungicides do indeed improve standability. And so I know that, I mean, some of you see that all the time. I'm the skeptical scientist who has to have the empirical data to actually prove to myself more than anybody else that really fungicides do improve standability. But going back to the nitrogen, one of the questions that we've had is how does nitrogen maybe affect the yield response that we get from the fungicide trials? And so this is the first year where at each of the outlying research farms, as part of the Cardinal trial, we also have a couple of we've included a couple of treatments where we're putting on extra nitrogen. And the hypothesis is that if you're running out of nitrogen, especially this early, you know, before we get to brown silk, we think that that probably affects your yield response to your fungicide. But we want to be able to collect data, and we want to be able to look at that a little bit more clearly. So Andrew Penny, a student with Darren Mueller last year, he did some initial work and showed that there might be something in it, and so we're just further investigating that at the outlying farms, and that data will be forthcoming. Okay, I think we're good. I can't think of anything else.
Well, good morning again, and again, welcome, and thank you for joining us here. Also, thanks to Dr. Allison Robertson, who did the video that we just viewed, and is here to answer your questions. Or Allison, we do have a 3 different questions at this point here, and more are still coming in. Here's just another one. One of them, the first one here, says some companies are claiming 4 to 6 weeks of residual on the new SDHI products. What have you been seeing?
Good morning. Can you hear me, Virgil?
Yes, very well.
Yeah. Good, great. Thanks for joining us this morning. Thank you for that question. So with the newer products, I started testing those a couple of years ago. And we had some good disease pressure. So for example, I'm actually up at Nashua this morning. And so at Nashua in 2018, we had good disease pressure. And I could tell when I walked into plots that had the newer fungicide products on that there was less disease at around about 1/4 to 1/2 milk line. So yes, I do think that these newer products, not only the ones that have the SDHI, but also, I mean, that would be something from Syngenta, right? The new BASF product, which does not contain an SDHI, but has that newer triazole in, or DMI, that I could see that in my trials. Those plots were greener, they were healthier, they had much less disease at about 1/4 to a half milk line. So that was 2018. In 2019, I didn't have a lot of disease, and this year I have no disease, and I do not. And so it's very hard then to pick out that longer effective period.
Yeah, something that doesn't work looks pretty good if there's no pressure on it, isn't it? And there was
Yeah,
a follow-up.
anything that,
Yeah.
anything looks good when there's no disease.
That's right. And there was a follow-up question to that you've already addressed, but then the question basically becomes, are the SDHIs worth the additional investment?
Yes, I think if you have high disease pressure, then these new products are definitely worth the investment. But, you know, in a year like this year, from my trials and what I've seen, you would have been fine with just one of the older, cheaper products.
Okay, very good. Thank you. You mentioned disregarding data from gooseneck corn. Have you done work to determine if fungicide has an effect on wind-damaged corn, goosenecked, green-snapped, non-derecho?
That's a great question. No. So sometimes, I mean, in some of my trials, I've had the goosenecked corn, but we've been able to walk through and collect data. And so if I can collect data, that's then I do. Actually, yesterday afternoon, me and my field manager, John Shriver, we were out in a trial that was hit by the derecho. Nothing like Marshall and Tama counties, but I would still say that, you know, 50% of each plot was lodged and goosenecked. And we were collecting data there on, you know, how many of the leaves were still green, and was there stalk rot, and we're looking at some other things in that trial. Once again, in that trial, there was no foliar disease, and we didn't see any stalk rot. And I'm not sure that we really saw any benefit of the fungicide treatment. That's, you know, just from scanning the data. Once I sit down and analyze it, then maybe we'll see something. But so there's a little bit of data, but yeah, nothing will help in a derecho, unfortunately.
Yes, you're right there. Have you tested any mid-season, and the timing was suggested V10 to V14 timing with any of the newer products, SDHIs and so forth?
Yes. So I started testing a V12 application in 2018. So I forgot to mention that I do a summary of these Cardinal fungicide trials on the ICM newsletter. And I believe that Angie posted a link to that. But
She did.
Yes. Okay. So if you look in that, since 2018, 2019, and now in 2020, we have applications now at V12 and then at R1. And so we are looking at those slightly earlier applications. In 2018, the V12 application did better than the R1 application at managing gray leaf spot, but not necessarily better yield response. And then in 2019, we didn't see a difference between the V12 and the R1 applications, probably because we didn't have a whole lot of gray leaf spot disease in those trials.
Very good, thank you. Are any of the fungicides you use or have you tested organic?
No, no, I haven't tested any organic. I'm just, you know, testing the ones the companies give me. So good question, but no.
Okay, thank you. Have you done testing on application methods and also on topography in the effectiveness of the fungicide?
I have not done studies on application methods, but Darren Mueller and I just had a student finish up, Andrew Penny. He did his PhD on application methods, and so looked at aerial and ground sprays. And then he also looked at different types of nozzles. And unfortunately, in his trials, he didn't have a whole lot of disease. So it was kind of hard to separate out the data. I'm trying to, yeah, it was, so that's being written up, and I'm embarrassed that I don't, as long as that fungicide is being applied effectively, it seemed to you know, you've got all your calibrations and everything correctly, those fungicides work pretty well, whether it's with a plane or a ground rig or any application technology. But if you want more information on that, you're welcome to send me an email, and I can pass that on to Andrew, and he can help answer that.
Okay, very good. Does topography make any difference?
Oh, the good question. Yeah, great question. I haven't looked at that. I mean, I suspect, you know, topography definitely makes a difference in terms of disease, right? In those lower lying river bottoms, you're going to get more gray leaf spot and disease development, tar spot, just because of the humidity sitting down there and the moisture. So so I would hypothesize that because you have more disease, that fungicide is going to control that disease, and therefore you might see a better yield response. But yeah, I haven't done any work like that. Good question.
Okay, the next one. If I have my own high boy sprayer, what about using lower cost products and making 2 fungicide applications?
I think, yep, that's, so I mean, I'm wondering if the 2 fungicide applications are maybe, is the person thinking about a V6 and an R1 application? I mean, if I was, and I don't have any data on this, right? So I'm just, I mean, I think the V6 application, I don't really like, because you're spraying those bottom 6 leaves, and then you're maybe getting the next 3 or 4 leaves that are in the whorl. Those bottom 6 leaves fall off the plant, and so you've only protected those next 4 leaves, right? I like the V12 application, because I think you get down into the lower canopy, you're protecting that lower canopy, and then a lot of the leaves. And I can see that maybe a V12 and an R2 or an R3 might help, especially with some of those diseases that develop in the lower canopy, tar spot and gray leaf spot. But yeah, I don't have any data, and so I'm just, you know, thinking about biology here. And yeah, so I mean, I guess at the end of the day, it comes down to your pocketbook, right? And if you can make 2 applications work for the cost of, you know, 1 application with a more superior product, a more expensive product, then yeah. I need to bring up fungicide resistance though, right? I mean, the problem is the more times we use these products, the more chance of resistance building up in our population. And we're already learning lessons about resistance on weeds and insect pests, and, you know, and we have resistance in soybean diseases at the moment. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. We are at the end of 30 minutes here, and so if people need to leave, please feel free to do so. We will hang on a little bit later and answer more questions for those of you who want to hang on and can. I would just remind you of 3 things that are coming up here. First of all, the recordings for yesterday are currently up on the YouTube channel, and Angie put the YouTube channel link in the chat box. The one for Monday, we ran into a little bit of a glitch, but it should be posted later today. And the one today should be posted within the next day or 2 on our YouTube channel. Secondly, this afternoon at 1 o'clock, For those who do have some down corn, we are doing a special presentation on managing down corn. You can register at http://www.aep.iastate.edu/corn. And that will be in the chat box also. Angie will put that there. And then would invite you to also join us tomorrow for tomorrow's session. That will be an overview of long-term tillage and crop rotation studies with Angie Reekens and Monty Casey. So thank you for joining us. And at this point, we will go back to the questions. Allison, the next question is, there has been quite a bit of discussion in Southwest Iowa on the benefits of fungicide applications, particularly in Adams and Taylor County, given the dry conditions that they have been experiencing. There has been dew most mornings. Any thoughts?
So, I mean, we have the trial down at Armstrong, where I can't remember that, is that Potawatomi County? But yeah, and then my trials up at Sutherland, also a little bit of drought there. Walking those trials last week, first of all, there was no disease. And then secondly, I could not tell the untreated plots from the treated plots with the fungicide. And so that just tells me that visually, I don't really see that fungicide having any effect. It's going to be interesting when we get the yields, just to see whether the fungicide did help with the yields and, under a drought situation. But yes, I know there's lots of talk that a fungicide can help. As you heard me say on the video, I'm skeptical, and I remain skeptical. Sorry, that's just me. So yeah, I don't, we should get some good data this year. 2012 was when we last had a drought. And if I think back to that data in 2012, we didn't really see a good yield response from using a fungicide then. So yep, I'm skeptical. Sorry.
No apologies for being skeptical. I think that's what scientists are. I think almost every scientist comes from Missouri. Show me. And that's what we want to know here. Another question. There are systemic and contact fungicides. Which of those has given the better performance?
Another good question. So, yeah. I'm trying to think. There were the older fungicides, right? For example, Bravo is one I can think of, which was a contact fungicide. The thing about those old contact fungicides is they washed off the leaf. And so therefore you would have to reapply them. With all of the newer fungicides that we're using today, they're all systemic. And so all of them get absorbed into the leaf tissue. The QOIs will get absorbed into the waxy leaf cuticle, and the DMIs will get absorbed into the mesophyll tissues of the leaf, and usually they get absorbed within an hour or so. So they're very rain fast. They're inside the tissue. They can't be washed off. And so that's why you can spray a fungicide and it can last for 2 to 3 weeks or 4 to 6 weeks, depending on what the active ingredients are in there. So I'm not sure if I answered the question correctly, but yeah.
Very good. You mentioned that you allow the farm superintendents to select the hybrids and that they use on their own farms. So then how do you account for the variability in hybrid disease susceptibility in your trials?
That's another great question as well. I encourage them to grow something susceptible, and I know up here today at Nashua that Ken's planted a susceptible line. But in my reports, what I will do is I will report the hybrid, and then I'll report what the rating was from the company for the various diseases. And so that gives you an idea of whether the hybrid that was being grown was susceptible to grey leaf spot, or did it have a pretty good score for grey leaf spot. But I think most of my farm managers are planting something that's more on the susceptible side.
Okay, and I think kind of a natural follow-up question then is, do you compare hybrids or genetics in your trials?
No, I do not. It's a very good question, and I definitely believe that genetics plays a huge role, especially in the fungicide response. But one of the reasons why I don't do it is because I don't know the background of the hybrids that I use. Many of them are from the bigger seed companies, and so I wouldn't have access to that data anyway. And so really, I can't tease apart how genetics, whether a male or a female parent, for example, or some family has any role in that fungicide response. I mean, I definitely think that it does play a role, but I just, you know, being a public scientist, I don't have information to that background data, and therefore I can't tease it apart. But I think it definitely plays a role. I'm certain of it.
Okay, very good. Can you quantify how much yield results come from disease prevention as compared to what is commonly called plant health?
That's a tough question. Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. I mean, if I think back to my 2012 data, I want to say that we were looking at yield responses of like 2 to 3. Well, I mean, even last year, we probably had yield responses. So let's say when there's not much disease, we might get a yield response of about 4 to 6 bushels per acre. Whereas when we have disease, then I can get an average yield response of maybe more like 10, above 10 bushels per acre. So yeah, that's, I don't know. I mean, does that, so maybe, yeah, I was going to say 50% due to controlling disease and 50% due to the physiological effects. But I think that, you know, when we have very high disease, that probably more of that, you know, that maybe that ratio shifts a little bit. You know, maybe it's more like 70% due to disease control and 30% due to physiology. Another excellent question. I just can't answer.
Okay. And there was a question that came in the chat box here, and Angie actually answered it, but the question was on fungicides on corn damaged with hail. And Angie put up the 2 articles, one on
awesome.
fungicides
Good.
on corn and soybean. I guess I would ask, do you have any follow-up comments to make?
No, not really. I mean, yeah, I think, you know, on hail damaged corn, I mean, we see less disease. At my northern research trial this year, there's hail damage up there. A couple of years ago, I had hail damage, and I definitely, it's a pain in the neck to try and assess those leaves anyway, because you've got to kind of glue the leaf together and look at it because it's stripped like a banana leaf. But I mean, I tend to see less disease. And so, I mean, really we should be spraying fungicides to manage disease, right? And so there's less disease on hail damaged corn, less fungal disease. And yeah, I mean, I think that those studies that Darren Mueller's lab did were excellent, and those 2 publications that Angie put up are really good publications and give us a good sense of that. Yeah, I would be hesitant about spraying a fungicide on hail damaged crops. You've already lost a lot of yield from the hail, and now you want to invest some more in it. And yeah, I don't know. I would be hesitant.
Okay. Another question, have trials been done evaluating disease pressure and fungicide effectiveness in different tillage systems? For instance, no-till versus conventional till.
Another good question. So no, I have not done any of that work. I'm not aware of any of my peers across the US doing that sort of work either. We know that when there's a lot of crop residue on the ground, that you will normally have more, especially if it's corn residue, right? You would have more disease in that corn crop. So, I mean, there's been a lot of studies published along those lines. But yeah, I haven't done any till versus no till.
Okay. We are at the end of the questions. I don't see any more coming in. And we do have a number of people who have hung on about 15 minutes longer, so we ran about
Thank you.
50% overtime. And so thank you for hanging on. I hope we have answered your questions. If you do have some follow-ups, you can contact Allison directly, or you can contact her through one of the field agronomists, and we will get your questions answered. Again, thank you for attending. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Thanks.
And when Angie Reekins and Mariel Casey give us an overview of the long-term tillage and crop rotation studies, I would also remind you that this program, as well as the ones yesterday and the day before, and the two that are coming up, are or will be on the Crops YouTube channel. That the link is over in the chat box. And would also remind you of the down corn webinar that is coming up this afternoon. And again, the link is over in the chat box. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning.